This is We Are What We Overcome. What you're about to hear are the ramblings and reflections of three ordinary people, drawing on their own personal and occasionally professional experiences. These conversations are unprepared, subjective, and should not be taken as medical advice or instruction. Anyone seeking help should always carry out their own research, or better yet, speak to a professional about their circumstances.
So how are we playing this?
We're playing it for laps. No, we return to what we were doing before.
Who wants to do it?
I did it last time. I'm very content someone else did it this time.
You know more about whatever this is.
Yeah. This thing that we're doing. You do the what thing is in.
Okay. When are we going to start? We're going to have a countdown, are we?
From
Or is it start?
10?
Just try and do mine again. No, shit.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome to. I said, have I got news for you? I was on the wrong show. But, welcome to We Are What We Overcome, the podcast. We're live from Leicester Comedy Festival. We all been recorded in it anyway. It's about as most live as I felt ever. But yes, we're here.
I'm going to suggest we restart that.
That was the bit for Neil to put before we start.
Well, this bit can go at the very end. It's fine.
We Are What We Overcome on this occasion features musician Matt McGuinness, improviser Nick Tyler, and psychotherapist Wes Evans. Sit back, enjoy, and remember, it's good to talk.
Ready?
No, go do it.
So we're here with We Are What We Overcome, the podcast, chatting about different issues around men's mental health or mental health in general. And this month we're going to be talking about why people don't reach out. Why don't they go to those people in the white coats, in the white walls, in the big grey hospital walls and talk about the problems?
Well, already those people sound really appealing.
It does. I'm super excited about that prospect. I will go to the park.
So
You
sit
also
back,
boomed into that intro. Yes.
I think it's going for that upbeat comedy routine that we'd expect from Leicester Comedy Festival. You're welcome, I think. We always like to start the shows by finding out how each of us is, which is called checking in, or in normal common language, how are you? And first off, Nick, how are you?
Hi. I'm all right, I think. I've been, a bit stressed and not sleeping very well. I don't quite understand why. Not entirely sure. Lots of very weird dreams, which I find disturbing. I don't know if anyone else has horrible, weird dreams, but I find them kind of take over a little bit. I have to try and forget about them. Otherwise, they just come back with greater intensity, which undermines the ability to sleep even further. And when you wake up, you're not sure if you're still asleep or not. And opens up a realm of horror that you might still be asleep or were never asleep to begin with, and the walls of reality start to break down. Apart from that,
Wow.
cool. All cool apart from that. Mm-hmm.
So pretty good then.
Yeah, right now, quite chipper, because I'm not trying to sleep or trying to decide if I've woken up.
Beat you that one, Wes.
I can never remember my dreams. That was my immediate reaction. I can remember them from the second I wake up, and then they just disappear. So
That's the ideal.
yeah. I'm all right. I'm tired. Everything's been really full recently. So I feel like I've been going constantly 100 miles an hour from one thing to the next, which is ironic because I didn't get here as quick as I thought that I would. It took me ages to get here, despite going 100 miles an hour. Didn't we have a running theme last time that everywhere just seems to be about 2 or 3 hours away from me?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that kind of fits for today. But yeah, so lacking a bit of space to sit down with you guys. I feel like I haven't sat down in some space for a little bit.
Cool. Monsieur Lamont?
Yeah, generally all right. Although I had a weird dream the other night about Edinburgh where I didn't book for the whole month. Didn't sell one ticket.
I think you remembered your dream too.
I mean, that one sounds terrifying.
I used to have a running dream when I was younger about maths for some reason, where it'd start off nicely. Someone asked you what 1 times 1 was, and then 2 times 2, and then it would go up to like 400 times, and it just go on 401 times, and I was like.
And then they asked you to count to 10 in German.
And then it went on for weeks.
Which you tried a few minutes
earlier,
ago.
and very well actually. It sounded like it was a natural from Liverpool.
It did sound exactly like that.
So I thought it'd be really good today to talk about And it's been coming out across a lot recently in different meetings I've been in, where the vast majority of men don't seem to interact with the usual social services, whether that be NHS or anybody else. And there's lots of figures banded around, some of which seem preposterous and some of which seem absolutely ridiculous. Like one says 76% of men who have issues with mental health don't actually interact with anybody.
What,
Makes
they
me
never
wonder
get
how
help?
they know as well if they don't. But
Well, the WHO one was the best. They said the figure was somewhere between 20 and 80%.
Huh. Yeah, that's not a helpful statistic.
Fine work.
there's another statistic that's like, I don't know, 60% of statistics are made up as well, isn't there? But there you go. But then that might not be true either.
Who said that?
I don't know.
But you're right, it does feel like a generally known thing that most men don't seek mental health support or don't.
Yeah, it's a long-standing kind of thing. It's been a thing for a long. I think it's better. I actually was thinking about this just before we started, and I looked up something about reasons why men don't talk about their mental health, according to the Priory Group.
Okay.
So, has everyone heard of the Priory Group?
The
Yes.
folk band?
Yes, famous folk band. Didn't go well, so they started like a mental health company.
Everyone needs a side job.
So apparently, the reasons are that 40% of people say, I've learnt to deal with it. So kind of just cracking on, I suppose. 36% don't wish to be a burden on anyone. 29% are too embarrassed. 20% talk about negative stigma. 17% not wanting to admit they need support. 16%, I'm sure we're over 100% now.
We've got to be.
16% not wanting to appear weak. And 14% saying that they have no one to talk to. So these are respondents to a survey about why they wouldn't
Well, I
speak
guess
to
you get
people.
more than one reason.
That's true, actually, yeah. I hadn't considered that.
They all sound recognisable, though, don't they?
They do.
They sound. A lot of them, like the stigma things, sound like things that I remember being told. Not so much being aware that there was a stigma about men seeking mental health support, but being told that stigma existed, which seemed more like a reinforcement of the stigma than anything else, which is peculiar.
I think the one that's not on there, which is the one that's been bugging me recently, so there's lots of things going on at the moment with different parts of the country with the NHS changing how they approach mental health. And so I'm involved in the group in Derbyshire, and it was about how the branding is and how it's perceived and all that sort of stuff and what kind of services they offer. But they don't talk about how they talk about it. And so when they looked at how the branding was going to be, they asked everyone to see it from a couple of examples of people of how they would see it. And not one of those examples was somebody who hadn't interacted with services.
So you mean while they were kind of redesigning the service, they didn't consult with people that wouldn't use the service to see why?
Think why.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was all around, and it was all like really flowery and poetic language. And instead of saying how are you, they'd say so. In a roundabout way between 1 and 20, with 20 not being great. How do you feel today? And
What's
I
your
was
current
trying to say,
emotional
well,
valence?
And
When's
can
the
you
last
count to
time-
that in German?
When was the last time anyone asked a friend in a pub that, how are you feeling from 1 to 20? It's nice to see you.
It's tricky, that, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think I recognise most of those things as aspects of why I found it hard to ask for help or look for help. But I suspect, like for me, a lot of it's easier not to. It feels like it's easier not to, because if you're still alive, then I guess it feels like you're coping. You know, you might not be coping very well, and if you do it for long enough, then it's just how you do.
That was the first one on the list, wasn't it? Most people had said that I've just learnt to cope. Or to
Yeah, well, I suspect that learnt to cope is probably a gross overstatement. It's like, I've learnt to cope through drinking 15
Yes.
pints a night.
I found
crying myself-
alternative strategies.
Yeah, I think crying yourself to sleep is a valid strategy for dealing with your mental health, I guess. These are the ways that we do survive, but they're not. None of them are good, I don't think.
If I think about having had lots of conversations with clients about this kind of thing, because usually in the initial kind of consultation or in like one of the earlier sessions, they'll inevitably talk about kind of how they ended up deciding to get in touch or reach out. And I suppose I could see some of those themes, like don't really feel like I can speak to anyone else around me, feel embarrassed, or a lot of kind of denial of that things are as bad as they are and all that kind of stuff. Usually what tends to happen is that things get so bad that it's like, okay, I really should do something now. Or my partner is kind of giving me an ultimatum, or my coping strategies are now unhelpful. So that's what I've found tends to tip people over the edge of eventually getting in touch if they were reluctant to at first.
So the one thing for me, thinking back about it, was that once you reach out for help, you're admitting the fact that there's actually a problem. Whereas up to that point, you could probably dismiss it as something else. You know?
Yes, you just assume that's just you. I certainly had aspect of that. Well, isn't this just me? I'm just kind of depressed and anxious and don't sleep. Is that not just? Isn't that just being me? Doesn't that sound great? I guess I should, learn to appreciate that and move on.
I just like killing people.
Hey, we said we weren't going to talk about that. That's still going through the system. But there's certainly. I agree with what you're saying. This aspect of admitting it and facing it, which means that it's about to become more personally problematic than it has been so far, or more something you've got to take responsibility for, and that's a lot of hassle. The do nothing is always immediately easier. It's always terrible long term, every single time. But in the immediate here and now, not doing a thing is much more straightforward. Or waiting until your options have been annihilated, so you have only one course of action, which is to go and see someone or to get, picked up and sectioned. The having to make a choice is sometimes impossible. We're paralysed in that.
I wonder if there's something about perceptions of what support will look like and what it'll involve and stuff like that as well. I think that's definitely in the mix for a lot of people.
I would say coming through school, I had no conception that mental health support as a thing existed. There's vague mentions of like health and well-being and mixed in with sex education and I don't know, international politics, whatever they teach you is like a weird group of stuff. But
PSHE they call it. They used to anyway.
PSOC when I was at school, Personal Social Education.
Same kind of thing.
I remember almost none of it, but I'm sure
that explains a lot.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't learn nothing. But I don't remember like mental health stuff being anywhere high on the list. Yeah, and didn't leave school with any expectation that the NHS would support. I know if I smashed my foot, I could go to hospital. If I've got the flu, I can get told to go home and drink honey and lemon and sleep for a bit. But I don't recall anyone ever mentioning or even coming up that, if you're a bit depressed, there's someone you can go and talk to about that. I don't remember it being talked about at school. People were clearly sad, sometimes would disappear for a while and would return. But I don't remember ever being part of a conversation. And
then it's the next step, isn't it? The thing that's come up quite a bit is once you've accepted it and then you seek out, one of the ways, particularly up to recently, is go and see your GP, and a lot of my mates won't even go to see the GP if their leg's falling off, never mind for something that they think is...
it's getting into the GP as well, isn't it?
Yeah, has anyone seen a GP in the last 2 years? I've got high blood pressure and quite bad asthma. I haven't seen anyone.
I have, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, no worries.
Well,
how are you, Matt? On a scale of 1 to 10.
Pinning you together. Nice. The drugs do work.
Which way round that one?
Super good.
Do you mean 11 being bad?
No, why would 11 ever be bad? Although I have done numerous surveys where they put the scale the wrong way around. You're like, this is really confusing.
The double negative things, like I'm trying to work out whether do I put that if I do or if I don't, and the way the questions are worded and stuff.
That would be a bad survey.
Yeah.
Well, with some of the stuff we've been working on, we've been talking to lots of different groups. So like the one the other day, which sort of I thought was great, but sort of slightly bothers me as well, is a group that we're going to chat to, and who are based in Edinburgh, and they go wild swimming, which wild swimming in Scotland to me sounds like you really need to see someone. But actually, it's a great way of a lot of blokes getting together and chatting about things in a way that they otherwise wouldn't. I mean, in August it might be acceptable, I think. But
do it in November. I mean, that's going to reset your brain, though, isn't it? Yeah, that kind of intense shock, which I guess is what whatever they call electroshock therapy now effectively does, doesn't it? For some people who've got extreme depression and anxiety that can't be treated any other way, you get a course that it just fries your brain, resets you, has surprising results. Yeah. I'm not sure if you can go straight to doctors and ask for that, though. That might come further down the track.
Yeah, I think there's a process that you've got to go through. Yeah,
do you think?
I think so. I'm not sure what the process is.
Desperation, I would imagine. You got to go. You got to find out that everything doesn't work first. But I think you're right about not knowing what support is going to look like.
Yeah, and probably having some misconceptions about what it'll be like, and that putting you off. So,
But there's also a degree of like self-recognition as well. You got to describe it. You break your leg, you're like, well, I know what's wrong. My leg really hurts, and it's because the bone's sticking out through my shin. That's really clear. If you're just depressed or anxious, those are quite hard things to isolate. It's where pop culture comes in handy, because you see it in TV, you read it in books, you see people's behaviour, you go, oh, I recognise that pattern of behaviour, that seems kind of familiar. And that gives us a chance to glom onto it and go, yeah, maybe that's the thing. And it gives you vocabulary to deal with it, not just for yourself, but in describing someone else. You can't see the doctor and just say, oh, I feel a bit weird. That's quite challenging to get through. You have to get the terminology that orders the information in your brain about how you feel to recognise that what these terms mean.
Inherently, as well, the issue is the state that you feel in at the time, isn't it? I mean, I can think back to the worst points I had, and some of my behaviour was awful. But at the time, it just seemed like
well, exactly, or even just like motivation levels and energy levels, or unhelpful thinking and stuff like that. So yeah, I suppose that could be its own barrier, couldn't it, to reaching out for support?
Well, you're in a moment where your brain is doing you in, and you're supposed to think clearly about how to deal with it. It's just...
But also, we talked about as well, having emotions is normal. So being sad when something sad has happened, being angry when something that's made you angry has happened, are fine things. That line between it being a normal response to an abnormal response where it's taking over, it's quite hard to define. You go, well, I've suffered trauma, therefore I feel traumatized. This is perfectly reasonable. This is my body doing its thing. Why would I need to get help with my body doing a normal, my body and brain doing a normal thing? The point at which it breaks down is harder, and sometimes you don't see it until much later. When I was having not a great time as a teenager, and I was being abused and trying to live with that, very hard to even figure out what it was that was wrong with me other than just being very distressed. Some stuff's happened. I'm mostly not thinking about that, but just everything is fried and I can't think, I can't do stuff, but trying to figure out why, despite having, in retrospect, quite a clear line of like, oh yeah, you've been fucked up by someone. That's why you feel really bad. That's why you feel really bad. And I go, okay, well that seems very clear now. And dealing with it at the time was not good. I mean, self-harm's much easier. It's quick, it's immediate, it avoids. I realise this sounds like an advert for it, but compared to like having to ask for help, it resolves and gives you that kind of endorphin kick. It feels like you're doing something. You can cause yourself more pain than someone else in a short space of time, very quickly and very easily, and that feels oddly positive.
Like immediate gratification. In your control, here and now.
Seizing control is a huge part of it. I think when you finally ask for help as well, you're seizing control in a way that feels, I guess, like you're giving control away, which makes it less appealing than dealing with that immediately.
I think there's probably something in feeling hopeless and that there's no point in asking for help as well. I think, if you're in a really tough place, probably can't imagine not being in that place.
Yeah, that's true.
How could talking to someone really help? I've had that kind of conversation with lots of people.
I think you also have to be careful as well when you get to that point. I mean, I remember one of the sessions where we talked about before, where someone said, "Did I want to express myself with the Lego that was on the floor and stuff?" And I was like, "No, I'll use my mouth. If that's all right."
Well, that's very good. Which means you're automatically in a better place than lots of people. They have those things for a reason.
But I do think the thing that we tend to forget, or people seem to forget, is that there's a whole load of people and blokes my age or around my age, who think that's what the therapy is, that kind of thing. It's that pretend that's what all therapy is. It's like
that's what I meant about the preconceived notions about what it is and isn't and stuff. And you talked about popular culture earlier. I think a lot of people, and they made jokes about it, but I think there's something in it that, I thought I was going to have to come in and lie down on a sofa and on a couch, that kind of thing. Very an Americanized version of kind of what mental health support looks like.
True, but think how many, just from watching TV and films, the number of like medical conditions and interventional drugs that you can just name. Prozac, electroshock therapy. I can give you like maybe half a dozen different kinds of therapy that I've mostly picked up on just from watching TV. So now I know that these things exist. Knowing what you're going to end up wanting to need or wanting to have or will be available is different. But just the idea that those terms exist in a way that I'm sure they didn't, 40 years ago in TV. He says, "Oh, what's wrong with Mr. Johnson on the soap opera? Oh, he's sad. He's just going to sit in the shed for 2 days." Yeah, there's going to be
But he's naked.
there's going to be no resolution.
Warm, isn't it?
He's going to come out dead,
It
or
is
he's going to come out
October.
absolutely fine. It's a soap opera. It's a lot more nuanced. We have a lot more information available to us, and I think the generation below us probably has a lot more tools than we do.
So things are shifting a little bit. Obviously, it's been it's been on the agenda for a long time to get people speaking more about mental health, isn't it? I suppose something we haven't mentioned as much is the stigma kind of element, or maybe even like the cultural kind of angle to it as well. I still think there's a British stiff upper lip, keep calm and carry on kind of vibe in the mix,
There's
isn't there?
bound to be. We're kind of dicks as a people, I think, for that, and it's not helpful. That's
What
how-
it is to be a man and all that kind of stuff. Do you think that's still as much of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, particularly rurally, that hasn't really changed as much as people like to make out. I think there's certain sections of society, and I can only speak in terms of blokes that I know, and they haven't really moved on much in that sense. They still have the same entrenched things, because that stuff that that's gone through their early childhood through to 20 and 30, and it's been ingrained in them that don't do this, do that, don't do this, do that. You can't get rid of that.
Well, there's even lad culture as well, just for example, isn't there?
Yes, I don't experience much of that. I don't think I've got any friends who I describe as just being lads, which is maybe a little bit sad, actually. But I
What
think...
about us?
Lads.
Oh, yeah, you two are very laddish indeed. I've never met such examples of lads before.
Let's just stop this and go and have a pint.
Yeah, I've got a pipe. We can have that. It'll be fine. But I think a lot of my younger male friends who are like mid 30s and under are a lot more likely to answer the question, like, "Oh, how are you doing?" with a truthful response rather than "fine" or "okay." Most likely to get, "Oh, not too great today," and then we'll tell you why. And I don't remember that from being at university as being that kind of response, or even being in the workplace in my 20s as that being like an expected response, that someone would actually answer that question other than
You have to
formally.
be careful looking at who your circle of friends is. You've got some of them, and they're absolutely ace. But I'm sort of, I guess, not really friends of mine, but people I'm connected to in the community wouldn't think for 1 minute of answering that question other than with, I'm okay, I'm fine, or whatever. They wouldn't actually tell me anything. Maybe it's just me.
Maybe.
Everyone else.
I'm not telling Matt about my
He should press
stuff.
them further. Do it at knife point, the natural way. It always gets better answers. I think I'm seeing a change, but it's in a limited subset of people that I know. But then I see more people on, the horror that is Facebook actually talking about their feelings than just posting, "Here's me in a fantastic dress." It's like, cool, whatever. Yeah, I see more stuff that feels like it could be honest there than we have done, 20 years ago, or whatever equivalents we had then, which I guess is...
Well, it's easier on. I suppose there's the thing about posting things online, especially for the younger generation. You're a step removed from the kind of face-to-face conversation, aren't you? So there's something disinhibiting about that. It's
Maybe.
kind of slightly depersonalised, a bit safer. Put it on there.
But you're also going to get more of a response. If you're open with some dude you've just chat with, bike sheds around, at the bike sheds, that place that we all go to.
Oh, yeah.
So how are you? Well, actually, I don't feel so great. That's one person. But you do it on social media, you're potentially getting hundreds of responses from people. Like that feels very overwhelming, or it does to me. I've occasionally shared stuff from the mental health blog I had while I was in counselling on Facebook, and immediately got responses going, "Whoa, that was more than I was prepared to deal with. I'm going to remove that. I actually don't want to have a conversation with 30 people about this. No, thank you. One or two. Oh, that's way too much. I don't know. That seems very exposing. So I don't know if people are just in need of more attention, and more attention means you might do something with it. I guess. If you really need help, more than one person going, you should probably get help, might add up to actually getting help.
I do think you're right that it's massively changed. I just think there are still big sections of society who it hasn't really changed for. And I meet those people every day. Not every day. Prior to COVID, probably every day. And so I think that's the thing that worries me about it, is that we've just got to make sure that we don't do everything on the basis that things have moved forward, because for a lot of people they have, but there's still loads of people who say absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I guess then the question is, how do you reach them? I mean, the people that you were mentioning maybe have not managed to. Yeah, how do we get beyond the current state that some people are like, yeah, it's cool to ask for help. I guess there's some kind of cultural osmosis, which is what I was talking about, where people realise these things are options.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I've had conversations in posts with friends of mine who haven't talked to anybody else or haven't talked to anyone professionally, and that's a good way to start off. You know, I think it's finding those places that people feel comfortable as oh, it's okay, because over a pint it's all right to say how your week's been, isn't it? You know.
Yep.
I think that's the central thing, isn't it? This being comfortable to do it. Because I think another thing that's probably high up on the reasons is just because you're putting yourself in a vulnerable situation, aren't you? You're kind of exposing yourself, not in that way.
Oh, I'll put everything back.
Thank you. That's the next show. That's for the video version, friends at home listening.
You're right about vulnerability. It's not just about being vulnerable and trusting that someone else isn't going to exploit that or whatever. It's honesty on the other side, isn't it? It's being brave enough to be honest about yourself is quite hard work. Yeah, and to hope that will be received in the same spirit and not dismissed. Although it's honestly that hard. I find it genuinely quite hard to imagine someone saying something, I don't feel real, and then just mocking it now. That feels much less likely than it would have felt.
I think there are more fears than just being mocked.
Yeah, why would anyone talk to Piers Morgan? Just what the hell.
I think there are probably more fears than just being mocked, though, aren't there? Kind of just what will people think? How will I be perceived? And just it's painful to say. Well, yeah, which kind of what we were saying earlier. You know, what's the point, kind of thing.
It's interesting, isn't it? You wonder if having that general awareness of those stats about the number of people that are on antidepressants or that have mental health issues and get mental health support, having those numbers clearer, I think, helps people a bit. You're like, oh, this is more normal than I thought it was. Yeah, what is it? 1 in 3 will require mental health support throughout their lifetime. Yeah, that's an insanely high number. Or it's a completely normal number. That's a third of people. So you being one of a third of people is fine. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah, for that to become more normalised and more known about. I keep thinking about we've had 2 years of having stats every single day on the number of people that have caught something, been hospitalised with something, and died of something. Yeah, that level of focus on just COVID is unlike anything we've ever seen before for seeing how many people are affected by literally anything in the world before. If we had those sorts of stats in public for a wide range of illnesses and diseases, mental health support, how many people are engaged in mental health this month, that would be fantastic. And I think because everyone sees that.
Yeah, it's not going to happen though, is it? Because if you make those sort of statistics public, then the onus is upon people to do something about it, isn't it? And that requires effort, money, resources, and not wanting to get too political. You know, it requires leadership and focus and stuff. And we're sadly lacking over that.
Well, from a different angle, that just reminded me of. Do you remember a previous conversation we had where you said actually finding out that lots of people were affected or feeling the way you felt had a negative kind of impact? Do you remember that? Yeah, that just popped into my head.
Don't feel special anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something nice about feeling unique for a while, isn't there? If you then knowing that, the trauma and the sadness and everything you're feeling, perfectly normal. Like, cool. Because partly, I think there's 2 parts to that response for me. There's one, I feel a lot less special, but also a real degree of horror that more people felt like that. That's horrific, I mean, a third of people, I don't know how many it is, a third of people occasionally contemplate suicide. That's horrific. These are brutal numbers. I don't know if that one's true, but it's going to be a far higher number than anyone would want to imagine is real. And you're right, it does require some kind of action, Matt. And I think because those numbers aren't shoved in people's faces and aren't reminded of them, then we don't think that these things are significant. Not significant, it's a couple hundred people dying a day, but that's getting that kind of parity for information is probably important and quite empowering when you have it. Having the data to inform the decisions that you make about your life. We say that throughout, throughout not just mental health, but all health treatment. Having information available to you about the courses of option that are open. You need to know that. We need to know that there's stuff. There are people out there who are really passionate about helping other people.
Going back to the way this conversation started, have you two had examples of friends who've spoken to you that haven't done anything about it?
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
What, recently?
yeah. And funnily enough, probably teetering on the edge of doing something about it, I suppose.
That's cool. It takes a while.
Yeah, I can also think of people that have had conversations over a long period of time, like stuck teetering on the edge of going beyond the friend circle.
Yeah, I would agree. For all the people, as I said, who are likely to tell you the truth, say how they genuinely feel. Yeah, I've got other friends. Yeah, there's always at least one friend like they could really do with some help. There's always at least someone who they really need to see someone who has some kind of professional ability to do this that is beyond just being able to have a chat in the pub. And yeah, you can nudge and suggest, but you can't make people do stuff either. You have to be in whatever that state of readiness is. As Wes talked about, you got to be so far past the point of no return that you have no choice but to ask to get help.
That's something I speak about with people again in some of the earlier sessions, because it's quite natural that they're talking about why they're here and what they want from sessions or whatever, what the current situation is. And sometimes it almost feels kind of checking they actually do want to do it, and they're not just being sent by someone or such a body keeps telling me I should and it's a good idea and whatever. It's like, well, what do you think? Do you actually want to be here? That kind of stuff. And that, if I'm thinking about it, honestly, probably does tend to fall with more of the blokes that have come in to speak, actually.
It is hard though. Even when I finally did engage with counselling, the first 3-4 weeks was still me avoiding talking about what I'd specifically arranged the opportunity to talk about, and then elliptically getting around in the
Speaking
conversation.
About anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Very intensely frustrating. It must be intensely frustrating for the counsellor. Perhaps not as frustrating as it was for me, knowing that that's what I was doing, entirely aware that I was avoiding actually talking about the stuff that I wanted to talk about.
Was that acknowledged, the avoidance?
It did eventually, yeah. I went, look,
by the counsellor?
I think they encouraged me to say it, and then I said, look, I'm not talking about any of the things that I want to talk about, and I know that I'm doing it. It's really frustrating. I don't know what you can do about that. I said, well, acknowledging it is good. Saying so, at least knowing what you're doing is less problematic than doing it unconsciously. Because now I can pester you and harass you.
And I guess that was avoiding what is painful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which makes sense. Looking after yourself.
I guess kind of.
Avoiding pain.
Yep.
Pretty clever.
Avoidance of pain seems like a good thing, doesn't it? Yeah. But sometimes you need a little bit of pain to get the rest of the pain out, I guess. I don't know. There's something in resetting a broken limb, I'm sure, as a metaphor. It's going to hurt a lot.
We haven't spoken much about stigma, and I think that's probably really relevant, isn't it? What do you think about that? We can be kind of suggesting that maybe the stigma is less and things are getting better and everything else, but do you think it's still in the mix?
Yeah, I mean, I had it recently with a family member who asked me about how I was, and on the basis of the shows that I've been doing, so they clearly knew.
It does seem like a hint there somewhere.
And they were more uncomfortable about it than I was, so I don't know whether they thought they didn't know what to say, or that, I mean, one of them was a bit put out that they hadn't done anything about it, but, people shouldn't blame themselves in that way, should they? But I think it is that kind of thing, isn't it? It's like, being honest with your family or the people that are close to you, telling them something that they feel that they probably should have known about in the first place or done something about. I think that's quite hard.
Well, it's like a reverse stigma, isn't it? I see that specifically. I think when I told my parents that I'd been abused as a teenager, and they had no idea. I think that was probably much worse for them than it was for me. Because we didn't do anything. I thought, well, you didn't know. And you're like, well, that's the whole thing that I was supposed to know and prevent from happening. Like, that's grim. I'm not sure I can help you with that a great deal right now. But I'm not sure.
That's kind of like not wanting to burden people or worry people or have them kind of, isn't it?
Well, the thing that they can't do anything about, except knowing is important. That's a lot of beeping. I think we've got a car reversing into us. Very alarming.
Either that or we're still being temperature checked.
But I do wonder about this because I'm not. Yeah, again, with the group of people that I know, I'm not seeing much of that stigma. I'm not seeing many people. I can't think of anyone specifically who is. So, oh, I'm not doing that. I don't want to look weak. Not seeing that in people I know. There's plenty of us going. I don't want to do it because I don't want to deal with it, which sort of seems legit compared to that. It's like, fair enough. I don't want to have to wrangle with all of these problems.
Yeah, so there's like burying your head in the sand, feeling hopeless, not imagining it could help, avoiding the pain, not wanting to be a burden. What else? Not wanting to be judged, not wanting to be viewed a particular way, it going against the grain with either how your family were or...
Actually, that's true. The only time I've really seen the stigma in action is in the workplace with people not wanting to tell their line manager or HR what's going on with them for fear that that's going to mess
the
with
job. That's a really good point. There's a
and
big reason why lots of people don't access the employee assistance programs that are in place.
And that hadn't even occurred to me because my workplace are basically cool and pretty open about stuff. Yep. And I've never really felt that. But
fear of some kind of repercussion.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are resistant to have things put on the file at the doctors and things like that as well,
And no one wants HR gossiping about them. That sounds awful.
The way to do that is not to get a job in the first place.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
No, the way to do that is just not to tell anyone about it.
Yeah, you're right. Hide it. Hide it.
Or both. Yeah.
Get a job.
Hide it, push it down, and then don't ever deal with it. Yeah. But I don't know why that didn't occur to me. I think it's because at work I don't feel like that's a problem. Everyone in my current workplace seems quite open and straightforward about that sort of stuff. Perhaps because everyone's had some really bad times and have also mostly come to the conclusion they then have to talk about it and deal with it. Maybe I know more people that have come through that
culture at your workplace. So.
Yeah. Also, we're a small team outside of a big corporate entity.
There is something about culture again. I think maybe people from different families would be different about it, depending on how things were in the family.
In a very stereotypical way, I can imagine like a big business sales room is not a great environment for mental health. Got to hit your targets, sales, manly, macho. That sounds like it's probably not a great place to go and have a quick cry at lunchtime.
A quick cry. Yeah, it's a timed cry because you have to get back on.
I bet people do. You compress all of your mental health needs into the tiny slot that you can deal with them in order to be able to cope with the rest of your day. Yeah, grim, but I'm sure people do that. Ugh. That's horrible. But I can't think of anyone who's made me feel like I would be less of a person for going and seeking mental health support, which is nice.
Yeah.
That is good.
I don't remember the last time I was employed by someone, so I've not really had that problem.
You're basically unemployable, Matt. We know this.
And
because of your mental health.
Comfortable with it as well. I think you're fine. We should wrap this up soon, shouldn't we?
It's where are we landing with this then? We just kind of listed a bunch of reasons why people might not get support. Sounds pretty grim.
Well,
it's getting better, but it's still a problem.
Next time we should talk about, and we could think about between the two of ways to overcome that and examples of how that, of different alternative ways of dealing with that and presenting it to people. Because there's lots of conversations going on at the moment about trying to fund different things that aren't necessarily traditional routes for mental health. That'd be quite positive.
That seems fair. It just makes me think that I found getting help was really hard to reach that point. Very, very difficult. But once I did, it was worth it. It hasn't fixed everything. It hasn't left me without any troubles or any problems. But it gave me some tools for handling them.
What did it take for you to get the help in the end?
Being bullied by my other half mostly, ultimately. But yeah, recognising that it's not supportable and actually my life shouldn't be with like 3 hours sleep a night and drinking and smoking to get to sleep. And in order
so it getting so bad.
Yep.
That you just couldn't carry on that way.
Yeah.
And a lot of influence from people saying you really need to get help.
Yeah, and I finally recognise it. And I think what's most frustrating, I think that thing that I would say to people that feel like maybe they should get some support but don't really know if they should. It's like you should, because you're burning years of your life when you could have had that support. And it might not have fixed you, and it would have been horrible and quite painful, but you could have found out that you could have a better part of life sooner.
I wish it saw that I was at the worst point before I went to this one, which is, on retrospect, a really stupid thing. You know, I waited for
You
this leg
silly
goes
sausage.
gangrene before I asked someone to put the bone back in.
Well, we're people. We're not necessarily good at making solid decisions.
There is something about, I think there is something about a culture change on many levels, you know, kind of big culture, workplace culture. So something about shifting that, and I think it is shifting. There's lots of efforts for that, isn't there? But, and I've forgotten what my other point was, so never mind.
It would have been beautiful.
Yeah, it would have been a good one. I'll remember it at 4 o'clock this morning.
We'll do it next time.
Next time, yeah.
Yep. Next time we'll be all about what Wes's lost thought was. All right, beautiful. I can cope with that.
You done?
I think so.
All right,
So next time.
see you then.
Take care.
Exhausted with some great
If you've been affected by anything that we've talked about tonight, that's cool. We were kind of hoping you would be. If you haven't been affected by anything tonight, then that's great too. You're probably fine. Of course, if you say you're fine, there's a good chance you aren't. So you might also have been affected. And if you've been affected before, you probably will be again. Please talk to someone. It can get better, and together we can survive. We are what we overcome.
This poor little boy, grounded by the sun, Baylor by his side for some big stride. We are what we overcome.
When were you on Have I Got News For You?
In his mind. Or right now, who knows?